Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Storyteller Studio. My name is Eric Taylor, and I'm not even your host anymore, because Frito is. So I'm just here. I'm a guy on the panel. So I'll turn the time over to No, I won't. I'll do the introductions. I won't add all of that extra to
Oh,
you.
can I first point out that I am a disembodied voice?
Oh my gosh, why
Yes.
are there two Sarahs?
Because two game beasts is always better than one.
Alright, take it over, Frito, while I fix this.
Okie dokie. So one of the things that we kind of chatted about and has been lingering in my head is we have a lot. Eric does a lot, and he does it really well.
Except
But
I don't know how to fix this.
I don't know.
I love how you're like, he does it very well, as I sit here and go,
He okay. Fine. We'll walk that compliment back just a little bit. He's a really good storyteller. He's still learning the whole streaming and all of this stuff. Um, but I kind of wanted it to me as a viewer and sometimes participant in the shows. It felt very much like Eric, who normally sits in the GM storyteller slot, was leading the discussion to a bunch of players. Now we've had a lot of other people on, and I'm pretty sure Matt has done some GMing and has run games, and so is the real Sammy P and others that we have had on the show. But it always very much felt like a GM talking to a bunch of players instead of a bunch of people that play in a variety of roles. And so that's what we're going to play around with. And I'm going to lead it as the resident new guy because I don't know what I'm talking about half the time. If it goes poorly, then we'll change it. That's the glory of the internet. So, for now, at least for today, I am Frito. You can find me at Twitter at DFrito, and I'm gonna run the talking bits of the show, and Eric's gonna do the rest of the bits. But for now, let's go straight up and say hi, Chantel.
Hi. How's it going?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. I'm just here. I like it. We didn't do this last week, so it's nice to be back.
Mm-hmm. Granted, this is what was gonna happen last week, so we just kicked
Yeah.
down bit. Eric, how are you? I'm on the screen now, so thank you.
we did
Not that
fix
I
it.
like seeing my face, but whatever.
We did fix it. I'm good. I don't have a double ear infection this week, so I can hear and walk and stand. So those are all positive things. And
Good.
I'm excited to not host, if I'm honest.
All right, wonderful. Matt, welcome.
Hi. I'm so excited. I feel like I'm within 6 feet of each of you, which is magnificent. And we're gonna have fun.
We have a fun topic ish to talk about today. But last but not least, Sarah, how's it going?
Hello, it's going good.
Wonderful. So today's topic is about side gaming and what it is and all of the various stuff about side games. So my first question, as a new guy, and Chantel posed this when we were getting ready for Eternium Gate and we had our session 0 and we created characters and whatnot. Almost as soon as the characters were created and we kind of set our initial plot lines, Chantel said, "Side gaming?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." So I'm gonna throw it back to you, Chantel, because I warned you about this before. Anyway, can you give us a brief, just an idea, just for someone coming in that's starting a session or has been playing for a while, what is side gaming to you?
To me, side gaming is when you have a game that you're playing in person or, on stream or face to face, essentially. You have that game that's going on, and the side game is like the bits that really don't matter but help you set up or help you to understand more about who your character is. Side game is, to me, zero sum. Like, it doesn't go anywhere. Like, it doesn't resolve anything that happens in the main plot line, but the but you learn something about your characters by doing it, by engaging in it. So it might be things like asking another character, "Oh, what's your favorite color?" Cool. Like, that's not going to give you any information that you can practically use to change the story without anyone else seeing it, but it might turn up in the actual session where you're like, "Oh, yeah, so I know what your favorite color is, and I'm going to use that piece of information to send you a coded message." Like, that can
Yeah.
happen. It's still zero sum, but something happens as a result.
Mhm. So not necessarily something that would be game influencing. Okay. So any other ideas, definitions of what side gaming is all about?
So side gaming to me is it's the game that takes place when you can't game, right? Like you have these games that you're super excited about, but you're limited to 3, 4, 5. Some people do 8, 10, 12 hours, whatever, but you only have that limited amount of hours for a session. But those character thoughts still go through your head. You're like, oh man, if our characters knew each other. So, for example, like your character Belmir and Surge knew each other, but you guys have no background beyond, oh, we knew each other. Side gaming can become role playing through some of those important moments in history of your characters if you want it to. Side gaming can be Savage Worlds covers it with something called interludes in game, but you can do interludes of, hey, we just hit this big plot arc. Now we have a delay until the next cool thing we do, because not every game is every day back to back to back. What happened in that time period? Did we go on an interesting adventure with, you know, the squirrel and the otter? Did they go do something fun in between things in
Mhm.
Britannia?
Yeah, and you kind of did that with Somerset. Some of the earlier episodes that a fairly significant amount of time had passed from one episode to another on stream, and so the session kind of launched with this. What have you been doing for the last week? And um, so okay, I lost my train of thought. Dang it. So it's I feel like some of it comes down to what we were talking about 2 weeks ago, which was character backstory. Of sure, I've got my character sheet and I know what makes up Belmir, and Chantel knows what makes up Sage, and Sarah knows Margaret and Margaret's grandma, whose name I forget, or mom.
She's just Granny.
She's okay, Granny. Pirate lady. You know, she knows about all these people, but their interaction with each other and how all of these characters know each other or don't know each other. So what are some things that you would do or not do? Well, okay, let's put it this way. What should not be part of side gaming? Chantel kind of mentioned, is stuff to the side. It's not necessarily anything that would influence the particular session that just happened or the campaign that's ongoing. What are some other things that you would not side game about? Matt, we're going to start with you.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. I feel like side gaming can be most interesting, but also the most high stakes when you're dealing with a character that has secrets or some piece of information that's guarded about their past or whatever. So I feel like in addition to not making any decisions or going on any kind of cohort actions that would affect plotline, I feel like you shouldn't do anything that would affect future plotline in that, hey, we decide in a side game that these 2 or 3 characters are in league and they're going to turn the tide in a certain direction. Because even though you don't in that moment decide, oh yes, this happened. You might be like, oh, we're chummy, we're an alliance, and that's counterproductive to the shared enjoyment of the game.
Some scheme hatchery between sessions.
Yeah.
Because that's been one of my, for me, and Eternium Gate being my first kind of long form campaign, that's been kind of my thing. Is as players, we all have a fair amount of time between sessions of said game, and I've got thoughts going in the back of my head. I'm like, okay, how do I, as Belmir, respond to this, and can I convince Peregrine that we should kill her instead of save her, or and that's been something that I just kind of kept quietly to myself, because I didn't necessarily know what to do with that, or if it would be possible to scheme in preparation for in game time what would be probably a couple minutes between sessions, but I've had a whole week to sit and stew on something.
I've had moments like that too, where I'm like, there's a fork in the road, and which path are we going to take? And so speaking in third person, I could say to Sarah, hey, I wonder if so and so is going to do this or that, because the one would make sense if A, B, and C, and the other would make sense if the other set of circumstances were true. And so that might be an invitation to her to fill me in a little bit on her character backstory that might lead down one of those paths. And so I end up with more clarity, but not necessarily a compact about what we're going to do at any certain juncture. Is that a good kind of contribution? Is that how some of you have used side gaming in the past? Or am I an odd duck?
To me, that starts to skirt the boundary between side gaming and metagaming.
Yeah.
That's where that goes for me, because the second I go, what would happen if, that's a hypothetical, and so you're kind of fishing for what the character would do if, and that's a strange place.
Yeah, for me, side gaming, there is a difference between a player discussion to me as a GM, and even as a player, but especially as a GM, when a conversation takes place between players about a decision, it needs to take place about past decisions, right? It needs to take place about stuff that has already happened that can't be changed based upon going forward. Side gaming, to me, must take place in character, and despite being zero sum, must be canonical and can't be changed. So when you have these discussions, it's a discussion of, hey, Sarah's character and your character are actually interacting. You're having a scene, right? You think of it as, the difference is you are play by post role playing rather than actually being on camera and role playing necessarily. Although I have seen side gaming that takes place in person or on camera. I've participated in side gaming that took place over a phone call, those kind of things. But those things become canon. Those are actual decisions and actual actions that your characters make in the game world. Whereas to me, what you described is exactly what Chantel said. That's more of a metagame choice informing situation that can drastically alter a story, and sometimes in a positive way, but also very much sometimes it could be in a very negative way. And one of the beauties to me of tabletop RPGs is the dynamic urgency of the storytelling that takes place in a session, because you're reacting to what your other players have done in that moment. So having a week to stew about what will I do in this situation is one thing, but having a week to out of character scheme is something that is to me very different. Whereas if you just create a scene and have a conversation about, hey, our characters are around the campfire, we have watched together in this, Eric said, or Peter said, or whatever said, we've been traveling for 2 weeks between now and next session. We probably had a chance to talk in those 2 weeks. Actually have the conversation in character, and then you're only going to be making decisions based on what your character now knows.
Good to know. So very much a not. I guess that's an important distinction that you kind of brought up. It's not scheming. It's not preparing for side game is not meant to prepare for the next session of we left off at this point. Now we're going to prepare for all the other things and to Matt's point, not use it as a chance to metagame and to uh, go down those rabbit holes. So aside from, I guess maybe character interactions, what benefits or what are things that should be? I guess no. Let's put it this way: what benefits are there to side gaming that aren't necessarily just like character backstory? Because there's my character backstory, but then there's side gaming with other players. How
So we can
How?
look at the Surge and Belmere relationship, right? Although that's less relevant now. But in a Surge and Belmere relationship, you guys are expected to backstory be friends. You've had interactions, you've had whatever. Two things are true there. You're forcing that in character, right? You're making yourself have this relationship of, hey, we're buddies. Why are we buddies? What have we done together? You can do past side gaming. So if you were to log into a Do Respite Discord and be part of a game and have access to side gaming channels, you would have, I don't know, Chantel can look, like 7,000 of them. And it's like your character's past 1, 2, and 3, so you can run through different scenes. Here's these interactions with all these people in the past. Here's these interactions with all these people in the present. And that way you can subdivide it out, but then you have those interactions. So you could have chosen to do, for example, a time when you and Surge went on some adventure into some ruins and found some crazy thing that Surge sold. Similarly, with Sage, you guys have this kind of paternal child relationship at this point. You could explore how that came about by role playing through, again, in a play by post kind of fashion or however, that coming about, finding Sage, those kind of things. In a modern setting, in a current to the game setting, there's a lot of options on things you can do as long as you have an interlude of time between sessions, right? And as long as they're not impacting the game, but developing those friendships and relationships, you have these big chunks of time that aren't on camera. Most of you haven't experienced that with me because I run games that tend to go day by day by day by day, because I like the 24 model of storytelling, right, where everything just takes place in this short chunk of time. But there are games you can look at. The East Texas University game on Saving Throw Show, and they're progressing through entire years of college in the space of 12, 16 weeks, right? And so they're having big jumps of time. So side gaming could allow those friends to do things together that develop those relationships.
And I think that to me is the important thing about it. Just looking at, like, we've only had one session of Paddington Prowler, but the point behind it for me is, hey, we're playing sisters. What is the dynamic there? What is the relationship? Who is like who is, the top of this pile? Where do we fit in terms of like our relationships there? And what odd things have happened in our history together that are now going to influence the game here? And all of those things, going back to what Matt said, are actually quite informative of decision making, because then we as characters can go, well, I don't know what Nora would do in this circumstance, but I know that Constance knows XYZ about Nora. Therefore, Constance would probably do Z behavior. And so those things come together quite nicely, just in terms of learning people.
Okay. And from what I've gleaned from the first episode of Paddington Prowler was Chantel, Sarah, and Katie did a significant amount of side gaming. And how from and that goes to setting your backstory. You're all sisters, so you all had some sort of familial connection with each other. How would the interactions on camera be different had you not side gamed and kind of been able to create the relationship and the understanding that these three sisters now have, if that was just left up to play out over the first several sessions? Sarah.
Um, well, yeah, since they're supposed to be sisters, there's stuff that they should know about each other that would have happened before that scene opened, especially since Constance and Nora are actually twins, which was a little intimidating for me at first because twins should definitely know a lot about each other. And so, but then we did a whole bunch of figuring out backstory, and not just, well, I'm this and how tall are you, and backstory like details, but we actually, well, what happened when Amelia was thrown out of the house? What would that have looked like? And so we role played through that on Discord. And so now whenever those things come up in the story, we all know what happened because we already side gamed it. We already role played through that. So our not only do we know what happened, but we know our characters who should know what happened, they know what happened. And so then that can influence our decisions and how our characters interact with each other later on. We know, why is this person mad at that person, and why does this person want to go do this? And so it's still to do with backstory, but at the same time it definitely influences and has an impact on the rest of the game.
Yeah. And I think if we hadn't, we would have been sort of negotiating that story on camera. You would see the negotiation of that being like, yeah, I probably do this because you would, okay, good. Yep. Because you do that. Yep. Good. We're in the same place. We think roughly the same on this idea. It's just about being specific. It's not, I don't think it would be negative not to. And that's the thing. Side gaming is an optional activity. Like, I don't think it's you specifically lose anything. I think there's things to gain. I don't think there's things to lose by not. I think there are things to lose by doing also, but I don't think there are things to lose by not engaging in it if you don't want to.
Right. I think it just makes having connected backstories easier because then you already have some idea of your connection. It's not necessary, but I do think if you're going to have a character that's connected to another character, it can make it easier to figure out that relationship. And it's also fun. If you find it fun, I found it fun.
And as a GM, yeah, I would definitely agree that I've had lots of people come to tables with these interconnected backstories. And we hit these moments where these connected characters should have, based on their relationship, a certain interaction with each other, right? Based upon a stimulus that's been provided. Then they don't have that interaction because they haven't actually established that that interconnectivity. They haven't interlaced their characters that way. It's just something that's been written down on paper. So for me as a GM, these days, having now experienced side gaming through Paris by Night and then experienced side gaming through Do Respite, and then I have experienced side gaming in the past, but I didn't know what we were calling it at the time, and it definitely was not to the Paris by Night / Paddington Prowler extent. It's something that I think if somebody came to me with interconnected character backstories that I would encourage at this point. I wouldn't require it as a thing, but I would be like, hey, this is something you might want to think about, and it's something I strongly encourage that you do because it will make your roleplay experience better. you will have a better understanding of these characters as a unit than you will if you don't do it. Plus, it keeps people hyped about game when game isn't going. So it keeps you connected and keeps you in your character's mindset and keeps story elements on the table in a way that it doesn't when you don't do it. So for me, especially with some of the games that I run, I think games that didn't have at least a little bit of side gamings might be strange now.
Mhm. Or at least I think some of the interactions might play out a little differently. You know,
Yeah.
when we were mentioning, Belmir and Surge, we hadn't really interacted aside from session 0 and creating our characters and trying to figure out, okay, how do I know someone else? And we were more or less told fairly quick on the onset of that first episode of Eternium Gate that, oh, Belmir is returning from a from a dig that Surge had said, hey, you should go look over there for some stuff. And happened upon Sage and Peregrine during that adventure. So since we didn't have that interaction, it was a little more clunky is the word that comes to mind, of kind of getting rolling into that session and getting our characters kind of integrated and talking to each other. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I definitely see the value of side gaming when you have people who are supposed to have a relationship together, because it tells you as players, and it helps congeal the story around what they do know about each other, what experiences they have had together, but also what they don't know and what experiences they haven't had together. Because it can get clunky, like you say, if you're both kind of guessing at the hijinks you've experienced in a shared kind of format, or and what you haven't. So by being able to say, oh yeah, we're acquaintances, and the way that we're acquainted is, and let me role play a couple sentences about our meet cute or whatever in kind of storytelling parlance, brought us together. And I think that's useful, because then you don't have to kind of hint at, oh yeah, remember that one time, and neither of you really knows what time you're referring to. So it definitely helps with some handoffs.
Mhm.
That said, it is sometimes fun to say, do you remember that one time that
True.
has never been raised before?
Yeah.
Oh, at the same time, we can't all know everything that has happened in someone's life. Even, with the characters we create, we're still kind of coming up with their nuances and understanding them as story progresses. So Chantel said it's not. Is side gaming necessary? Yes or no? But then we're gonna gray area it.
It depends on how intensive your session 0 is. Because if session 0 puts a lot of that framework in place, for characters that know each other well, then you're okay. If you have characters where the premise is they're just brand new acquaintances, you don't need it. So it depends a little bit on character and session 0 mechanics.
I'm going to say no. If you, I'm going to say no, because you don't need it, especially not if you're not trying to tell a story to a group of people, if that makes sense. Like if you are home gaming, you don't need it. It's a really good shortcut for us, because everything that we discuss, or most things that we discuss, will be in front of a camera, in front of people. So we're trying to hijack the system, sort of, to try and make it so that the audience can see a story.
Mm.
I mean, we're also just enjoying ourselves, which is a lot. So I would say yes for fun, but it's not necessary unless you're streaming a game, I would say.
Yeah. And I would say that I would say even for a stream game it's not necessary. I think it's an improvement. I think it definitely helps, and like guilds what's going on, but it's not a requirement by any stretch of the imagination. I have seen plenty of streamed games that run just fine, especially because there's that substantial trope of your 4 or 5 people who meet in a bar. Hey, you look trustworthy, let's form an adventuring party, right? Like, you're not going to have had side gaming up until that point, because you haven't known each other. And then, depending on what goes forward, you may not need it. So I don't think it's necessary. I think it can be fun, and I think it can be a good, like, seasoning addition to what you do, but I don't think it's required.
Yeah, I'm gonna join that it's not necessary but camp. That it's not necessary, but if you have characters that are really they have interconnected backstories, or depending on how role play heavy your group is, it can be a really nice addition to your game.
Not necessary, but it can definitely enhance the experience of the game by
Enhances,
having some backstory, having some understanding of who your players are, going in and whatnot. Yeah, because that was, I don't know, for me. Okay, so we're gonna rewind all the way back to the very first episode that I was in as Father Sam. I'll be honest, I had no idea what one of our players was doing the entire time. And not just because it was a one shot, which kind of evolved into a 3, episode show, but as a brand new player going in for the very first time, I'm like, okay, I could figure out what Chantel and Blue and Vera, what their characters were about, but for Flounder, I was lost. All I could tell at the end of the third session was he's some wacky mad scientist. And there was no, interaction between us outside of the show. But would I don't know, it just seems like there is an obvious benefit to side gaming and kind of figuring out how the various characters know each other. Even if they're just going to show up for a single session and then disappear.
I think as we talk about side gaming, I think it's pretty important that we hit on the fact that it doesn't have to just take place in the past, because that's what we're nailing on right here, right? We're focusing on that, but playing Paris by Night, Chantel and I did a lot of side gaming as Kiar. Wow, I feel terrible because I can't remember. As Renee.
You can feel terrible. You can feel terrible now.
Do you know how much sleep I've not had? As Kiara and Renee. And I did a lot of side gaming with Vera related to being with Kiara and Moonin. And those things took place in the modern day. They took place in between sessions. You could watch those episodes and see us. Mirrors would hit on, and this is where we're going to be next week. And we would get into postmortem, as we call it here on Do Respite. And we would always be in that, like, what do you mean there's only 2 hours between this session and next session? Like, are you insane? We will still figure out how to fill those 2 hours. But, it was this thing that it can take place. The difference is, and the critical point is about present day interlude style side gaming, is, to me, as a GM, but also as a player, it needs to be what's called zero sum. Nothing you do can have a plot impact. You can't kill an NPC. You can't kill, heaven forbid, you can't kill a PC. You can't do anything along those lines. You can put plans into motion, but those plans need to take place in session. And I'm not just talking about on a show. On a show, it's 3 times even more important to me. But in a regular game, you need to there need to be limits on what can happen in interlude style side gaming and what can happen not in interlude style side gaming. There are examples in Do Respite chat where Chantel will pose a question, or Katie has done it frequently. As Katie is learning side gaming, they'll say, "Hey, I want to do this," and I'll be like, "That is not zero sum. You must do that in a session." Because it's going to impact the story in a way that other players need to know, and in the case of Undue Respite, an audience needs to know. But that's for us, right? And we try to talk about not necessarily streamed games, just regular games as well. The other thing that I think is important that I want to make sure we touch on is you can't side game without your GM. You just can't. If you're side gaming without your GM, you're essentially just metagame scheming at that point. You're not actually doing anything canonical because the world is going to be impacted, and a lot of GMs, I've made this analogy to some of my players before, but I have a series of chessboards in my head, and the pieces are always moving. And there are pieces on the other side of the world of Emios and Eternium Gate that are reacting to what you guys did with Sazgamath, right? You guys don't know them, you don't see them, but if you and Vera and Chantel went and sat in a private Discord channel and role-played out a campfire discussion that I couldn't see, I can't react with that in the world.
I don't want to write in the book anymore.
You're going to write in the book. You don't get a choice.
I have learned how full color Emios is over the years, because it's like, yeah, a butterfly flaps its wings and suddenly there's a portal to another dimension or something. So
don't say butterfly.
Or canary. But that is kind of one of the things that I've taken away and thought about since last Wednesday from our mid-season finale of Eternium Gate was, okay, sure. A, where's Carter? B, is it still a very, very never-ending winter that we abandoned on episode 1 up there in that particular area?
That's a question you're not going to get the answer to, my friend.
It's true. That's not. Maybe some other campaign will start at the same point and solve that plot hook. Probably not. But I think one of we don't know where Carter is. Carter is on the beach getting some sun. That is where we left him. And I think for me, this kind of plays into side game. Well, I don't know. I'll leave this up to you guys to ask, because when, and I'll just pull back the curtain for a bit. When Belmere acquired the book, I was very conflicted about it, and took several days to think about, okay, am I going to read the book? What potential, because my mind just went to the worst place of, I'm just going to become some enthralled person by Sazgamath and do her will all of the time, to it could do absolutely nothing. And I posed that to Eric in chat of saying, okay, I'm open to this plot line. I don't know where it will lead. I don't know what it will do. It might not do anything, but I'm open to exploring it. And I had thrown out a couple questions about, what it was and where things could go. And I got some ideas from a between the session standpoint. And I'm sure if I had said anything that he would have said, no, you can't find out about that until you actually do it on camera. But have there been, what have been some times where you've side gamed or interluded between a session that have proven beneficial to your character's development, or their interactions with the other people in your cast?
I mean, every Side game. Every scene that I've had an interaction for Paddington Prowler, for a start, because there are some scenes that I have where, like, the aim for me is just to figure out, how does this character think? How does this character talk? Like, what is important to the character? With Paddington Prowler, it's been a very unique experience because I've been side gaming with a lot of other people who are side gamers,
Mhm.
but not not what's the word? Not experienced side gamers, if that makes sense. So it's been really helpful learning about who my character is and learning about who I'm playing with is one thing. Like, you learn a lot about the people you're playing with from side game, but you also learn a lot about who your character is, what they're thinking, what they're saying, how they say it, how they navigate other people, how they navigate the world, um, how they navigate hindrances, and how hindrances turn up and work in that world. I don't think. I mean, there have been times where side game has gone too far, as in it stops being zero sum. That to me is not beneficial. It gets in the way and it makes things very difficult when you come back to the actual game, because it's supposed to be
Mhm.
an actual game versus a side game. When you come back to the actual game, there are times where side game has you reach the point where you may as well be playing a play by post.
Yeah.
To me, anything that is not that is beneficial.
Okay.
Yeah.
An example for me right now is the character of Amelia, who you can see in just under an hour. Katie created a character that Katie didn't quite grok. Katie knew what she wanted, but she wasn't quite okay with why this character was the way this character was. And as side gaming progressed, this character became even more of a over the top version of this. And Katie needed to understand why this character would behave this way. Katie is an individual who humanizes her characters to a very extreme extent and needs to know all the motivations and things like that. If we had not done side gaming and if we had not had conversations about it, Katie wouldn't understand why Amelia is the way Amelia is. But Katie now really gets it and can play this character who is very intense and is kind of a super terrible person, um, and feel okay with it. And I think that's one of the things is the benefit of side gaming does not have to be plot related. It can be being more in touch and okay with your character, being more in touch and okay with a character your friend is playing that you can't understand, right? Like, example, if we'd continued playing Deadlands and you had side gamed with Flounder, you might have been able to understand what Dock Lightning was about. Being able to understand the world better. Because, especially in a stream game, but also just in a general home game, you don't want an info dump every single session. But in you guys' case, you're playing an Emios, which is a world with 25 years of real life writing and hundreds of pages of story and thousands of hours of other campaigns that are all canonical that you have to interact with. Getting that info dumped on you every session is painful and takes a long time and isn't even fun in a home game, much less in an online game, where the only people who maybe care about that information is your character. So getting that info, as long as it doesn't disrupt a plot point outside of game in a side gaming setting, makes more sense, right? If Belmere wants to learn certain things out of the book, for example, Chantel having interactions with the Everdream on Sage, those kind of things. Those are good uses for side game. Other examples of good uses of side game, to me, are when you have certain background plot threads or side plot threads that are not relevant to the main thing and are not going to impact anything that maybe you and another player are comfortable with, but another player at your table isn't necessarily comfortable with, and you want to explore that part of the game, that part of the world. And as long as you had a conversation with your GM and that other player in very much that safety tools, lines, and boundaries kind of way, you can have a conversation. Some of the side gaming with Chantel and Katie is way darker than Sarah will want to go, right? And we know that because we all know Sarah and we're friends with Sarah. And so we have those conversations and those roleplay scenarios where Sarah doesn't have to interact with them and they don't have to bother Sarah. And to me, that is also a valid use of side gaming, is to explore character facets that aren't appropriate. It's not the right word, but it's the one I'm going to use. Appropriate to other members of your party.
Yeah, and also it's a good way to just lightly tap on your boundaries and see where you're at. I mean, there's been a really interesting scene that happened between Sam and I, where out of scene, Sam was like, Chantel, why are you fighting me on this? And I'm like, I'm not fighting you on this. And he's like, oh right, Constance is fighting me on this. The the character of Constance is not a feminist, and Sam knows that I am. So he's like, this doesn't make sense. Why do I have to explain this to you? You get it. And I'm like, I get it. The character doesn't. And so those, like, tapping on those sort of opposite parts of me and those things where both of us are basically face palming at my character are actually quite interesting and fun to do, but good to do off camera so that we establish how far that limit goes and what that limit is.
And
And
obviously, go ahead, sir.
sorry. And I was gonna say, and could be good even if you're in a home group to do it just between the two of you, either over text messages or in person or whatever, just so if you're not comfortable with that in front of the whole group, and I don't know, if things go sour, you can be like, no, wait, I think we retcon that. And then it didn't happen in front of the whole group. If it's something that you're like, I want to explore this, but I'm not 100% sure about this thing. So it could be easier if it's just you and the other character and you don't have everybody else watching you, even in just a home group.
Yes. But again, I would say from a safety perspective, you want GM involvement just as a
Right.
safety, like as a thing. Because then if you do butt up against one of your lines or veils in whatever capacity, at least then the GM still knows that you've, like, they suddenly know, oh, that's a line for you, or that's a veil. Oh, this was going to come up later in the story. Now we're not going to touch this at all because we don't need to.
Should other players be informed, let's say in broad strokes, that let's put it in a Paddington Prowler scenario. The sisters know a lot about each other. Sam, I'm sure, knows, I mean, he at very least knows about Constance and has a relationship with her. Do other characters need to know at least the broad strokes of the sisters' side gaming? Let me. Do other player? If I wasn't part of the side game, should I know what was going on between
No.
the four of you?
Nope.
Yeah.
No. So, like,
my perspective is you should be informed that side gaming has occurred. Not necessarily what it is.
And I don't
but
agree with that.
Yeah. And I figured we would come on different sides of that spectrum, but that's my perspective on it.
Yeah, like, because your character doesn't know, right? And so, and nothing that happened in that side game, and I think that's an important distinction. If PvP is happening during your side game, you need to stop side gaming, and you need to stop side gaming right now, and probably reconsider your hobby in general, in my opinion.
PvP?
Player versus player.
Cool.
If you're a character hatching schemes in a side game against another character, at my table, that's 100% not acceptable. If that's the kind of game you and your friends want to play, you do you. But for do respite purposes and for my home game purposes, I don't like character versus character stuff because that's not why I'm here to play. I can play video games for that. I'm here to tell a cool story with my friends about working together, and you can still have animosity toward each other, and you can have characters that don't get along, whatever, different conversation. But nothing that took place in a side gaming session really should have an impact on another player. And so filling someone's bandwidth, right, with, hey, by the way, I did side gaming with Chantel and Sarah this week. To me, that isn't a thing that if I were a player I would want, or if I were a player I would need, because nothing about it involved my character. But being told it happened then makes me wonder why I'm being told, because it will have an interaction there. So for me, if side gaming is going to happen, because it's zero sum, because side gaming will not impact the plot and cannot impact another person's character, it's just between the GM who should be there and be involved and the characters who are involved in a side game. And a side game doesn't have to be 2 characters. A side game can be, 2, 3, 4. A side gaming can just be between a GM and a player, as long as in current situation it remains zero sum. So that's my stance on it.
So Matt, why yes?
So Eric makes an argument that if it doesn't affect your character, you won't know that it occurred. I feel like situational awareness would be a little bit greater among players, so that
But that's
you could probably
metagaming.
sense.
That encourages metagaming is the problem.
Okay, sure. So I mentioned that side gaming can be more appealing for characters that have deep connections or secrets. If there's a lot of secrets, it can pull one person out of being able to contribute to story, because they'll be pursuing a storyline and then everything gets thrown a little bit off kilter. So the one less favorable experience that I had with side gaming was a little bit of that. And if I had known that there was more side gaming going on, I would at least have been more prepared, a little nimbler to the situation when it unfolded.
Okay. Makes sense. Thank you, everybody. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Chantel.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Are you sure? Because I was just going to close this out because we're about time. Anyway.
What I was going to say was, it sounds to me that this, if it's capable of pulling the plot line off kilter, then it sounds like it wasn't zero sum side gaming.
Which in the example of what you're talking about, it was not. Which is one of the changes that I as a GM have made as I have learned more about side gaming, is side gaming needs to be zero sum, and side gaming needs to not have any kind of involvement with anybody other's characters who's not there. And that's just my personal line on it at this point. Because again, part of the beauty of the role play is those in the moment decisions and how my character reacts to a stimulus in that moment, right? And so side gaming exists to fill the moments that won't happen in session, but then your interaction with it, or my interaction with it, will need, to me, is best done when it's natural. And it involves that. It's more of that just that concept of like, it's just, to me, it is more of a metagamey kind of thing, right? If there's something, even if you don't know what it is, it's all of a sudden you're planning contingencies for the way you think a side game could have played out. And so if your GM and if your players stick to a zero-sum game that doesn't involve anybody else's character and can't have an impact on anybody else's character, then it's a safety thing, right? It's keeping your players and their characters safe in those situations, because we're all friends and we're all there to tell a story collaboratively together. So that's my thought on that. That is an example. The example that we bring up quite frequently is an example of my failure as a GM to keep side gaming where it needed to be. And so that's just something that needed to be worked on, and the lesson that I have learned, in the past 3 years or whatever.
Sure. Thank you, everybody. This has been very informative for me. But I think at the same time, it's been a good discussion for us to kind of understand a little bit more about the role that side gaming can have in fleshing out the worlds that we're creating and the worlds that we're trying to show and share with everyone who watches, and being able to have a little more fluid, a little more realistic interactions between the various characters can come as a result from one or more side game sessions where we have a chance to meet each other and understand how that various character works. So thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. I'm Deep Frito. You can find me here on Wednesday. We will be doing a series of interesting shows. I'll let Eric talk about that because he knows more about it than I do.
Yep. So this past week we had our mid-season finales for Somerset City as well as for Eternium Gate, and due to some casting changes heavily related to life stresses related to COVID, we are retooling a couple of things with regards to those shows, and I need a week to do that because I run 5 games at a time, so I need to make some changes. You only see 3 of them, but 5 games at a time. So we decided to do some one-shots in replacement of our Wednesday and our Saturday programming, which is why you're not going to see the post-it notes show up on the right-hand side of the screen today, because I wasn't going to do the graphics work to make post-it notes for one-shots. It wasn't going to happen. I didn't have the bandwidth for it today. But so directly after this, you can find us for Paddington Prowler. That's going to feature Chantel. It's going to feature Sarah. It's going to feature Sammy P. And it's going to feature Katie. Then Wednesday, we're playing a game called Crossrip LA, which is a modern horror-esque kind of game. So that should be fun. And then Saturday, we are playing Bedlam at Brandywine something. I never remember what the third word of my alliteration is, but Sarah might.
Basin.
Yep. Basin. I couldn't ever remember if it's bridge or basin because I've gone back and forth. But so Bedlam at Brandywine Basin. It's Barley Wine Basin. And that's another Critania game. So come watch some cute little critters get involved in antics they probably shouldn't be in. And that will feature Sarah and Jeff and a couple of other people who have not appeared on the channel before. So I am going to plug people really quickly since we're running out of time, and then I'll have you hit me all with your Twitters and we'll get out of here. So you can find Shawnee B tomorrow at noon Mountain Time on @Scraticus on Twitch, or also I believe on the D&D official Twitch, playing Cleanup Crew, which is a D&D 5e game. You can find me tomorrow on @Scraticus's channel playing Call of Cthulhu, because I got invited to go do it, so I'm going to. And that is at 3:30 Mountain, I think. I'll double check and I'll tweet about it. I keep a lot of time straight in my head.
Or Eastern, yes.
Yeah. You can find Frito on Wednesday playing Crossrip LA. You can find Sarah on Saturday, and also in like half an hour, but on Saturday playing Bedlam at Barley Wine Basin. Man, my own alliteration is going to kill me. And then there's Matt, and you can find him here next week on Monday for more Storyteller Studio, and we are trying to find a way to get him into game, but he still plays in our local not streamed game. He just doesn't play currently on the channel. So I'm going to fire around. Give us your Twitters really quick. Starting top left, Shotty B.
At Chantel B. And come check out my webpage at wordswithcolor.com.
With a U because Brit. And Frito.
At Deep Frito. I actually posted something today, and I'll probably do it again later this week.
Hooray. At Sarah. And Sarah.
Hey, at RP Game Beast. And I have tweeted once. And no promises that it will happen again, but we'll see.
And it was a cool cosplay pic, so go like it a bunch of times and maybe we can get more cool cosplay pics. And Matt.
At Orcish1_83. Let's be friends.
And I am at Shrimpicles, but primarily you can find me at Do Respite at this point. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us. We will be back in 25 minutes for The Curious Case of the Paddington Prowler, our Victorian creepy steampunk game. But until then, on behalf of Chantel, Frito, Sarah, and Matt, I've been Eric Taylor. This has been a Do Respite production. Stay safe, stay home, and we'll see y'all next week. Bye, everybody.